If ever there was a Yami Noob first ride and review that was long awaited, it was this one. Folks, in front of us, we have the new Ninja 500 in the 40th anniversary livery and the SE package that gives you some nice little benefits and features and little add-ons as well. Now, this motorcycle, near and dear to my heart, as many of you know. I used to race Ninja 400s and CMRA Endurance. I've bought and owned just about every beginner sport bike, and this one is the one that has been hotly anticipated. Kawasaki's answer to the hyper-competitive entry-level beginner sport category. You got bikes like the RS457 that we recently gave away. You got the CF Moto 450 SS. We have this new plus-sized beginner A2 compliant category, and it is extremely, extremely competitive. Now, the coolest part about this Ninja 500 SE we have in front of us is a giveaway bike on YamiNoob.co. Make sure you go to the website, get your entries locked and loaded to win this machine. We've been doing some great entry-level bikes towards the end of the year here, but you're not going to want to miss the last ultra spicy bike we're going to do to wrap the year up. This is not the last giveaway bike for the year, so make sure you head over to the website, get your entries locked and loaded to win this Kawasaki Ninja 500 SE. Now, let's talk a little bit about this motorcycle before we take it out on the road and do a comprehensive ride-in review. Okay, so Ninja 500, you can kind of think of this motorcycle as an evolution on the Ninja 400 platform. Kawasaki's take on this, in my opinion, was if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we are working with the 451cc parallel twin, the Eliminator engine from the Cruiser, the long stroke version of their old 400cc engine. This one makes about 51 horsepower and 37 foot-pounds of torque, if memory serves me correctly. Now, given this motorcycle's weight, it fits perfectly in the A2 compliant category for Europe and other markets as well. Kawasaki is highly limited in what they can do with this category because of those licensing restrictions, which is why we get these sorts of motorcycles. Lots of the components here are largely the same from the Ninja 400. Again, I have lots of experience with that category and that specific model, and so I see the frame here is basically the same, front suspension the same, front brake the same. So much of it is the same from the 400 that you might say, well, all they did was just increase the displacement and lower the rev ceiling a little bit. That seems a bit sad, but in fact, when we ride this motorcycle, you guys will see that Kawasaki did a lot of small things that add up to a much larger picture of what they were going for specifically with this motorcycle. So SE trim gets us the really cool keyless ignition system. You tap it here, turn it on there. TFT display comes on. That's a first for the 500 or 400 category that this bike used to be. Used to get just an analog rev counter and little digital speedo readout, but now you have several other things on this dash. You have RPM nice and big here, speedo nice and big, the fuel, the range, trip, a couple other things you can dial in here, but that's about it. And this motorcycle actually is pretty simple. Cable throttle, no traction control, much more simple than a lot of the other stuff we're seeing in the category, specifically the RS457, which you guys probably saw our detailed comparison between these two models. SE trim also gets you the seat cowl, which I currently do not have on this motorcycle, but you do get the cool little seat cowl. You get some tank pads. These are not necessarily grips. They're not very grippy, but they're just kind of tank protectors. And you do get the Kawasaki frame sliders as well, which is a great add-on for beginner riders who want to drop their bike. You also get a little radiator guard right there. Larger windshield, which is good for protection from the wind, of course. And you get a little USB plug right there as well. And of course, the SE livery, or the 40th anniversary livery, in fact, gets you this kind of colorway that you might have seen on Jonathan Reyes Kawasaki a few years ago. And you do get the little 500 badge there, reminding everybody that you do, in fact, own a Ninja 500. Let's start the bike up and take a listen really quick. Parallel twin with a 180-degree crank. Pretty utilitarian, I will add. This is the same exhaust setup from the 400, so if you wanted this to be a little louder, all you got to do is swap a slip-on this bad boy, and you get a lot of sound out of this thing. Let's take a listen really quick. Kind of same as it's always been, you know? The Japanese 180-degree parallel twin has kind of been the same for like 15 years now. But again, evolution, not revolution. But let's swing a leg, talk about the cockpit. Let's go ride. Okay, swinging a leg over the 500 And it still has the ultra approachable nature. The seat height is a little over 30 inches. I have a very pronounced bend in my legs at about 5'11" and 32-inch inseam, 165, 170 pounds with all my gear on probably. This bike just about fits me. I think this bike is definitely intended for somewhat smaller riders. You'll notice here the same suspension you get on the old Ninja 400, these smaller forks here. The CF Moto and the Aprilia feature larger diameter fork with a little bit more stiff suspension. But you're going to see, again, all these components, Kawasaki's trying to tell you something with this bike. They've done a very interesting thing here. They've not chased after maximum performance or anything like that. And in fact, they have another model, the ZX4RR, that we're going to talk a lot about in today's video as well. So let's go ahead, click it down into first. Rider triangle, pretty compact. No quick shift option, no TC, cable throttle, nice and simple. Let's get moving. It's remarkably similar to the 400. Like, literally, as soon as you take off, if you didn't see the larger fairings, which this bike definitely has wider fairings, a bigger presence to it on the road, you'd swear you're on a Ninja 400. Kawasaki really didn't do a lot here to try to make it seem like a brand new model or anything like that, given that you have basically the same engine architecture, just a slightly longer stroke. I bet the engine block is probably remarkably similar from the 451 to the 400. I'm sure they probably only changed those things. Let's get a quick pull in just to this. Now you notice on this bike, I think we hit 60 back there, which is pretty cool. You notice on this bike you don't have the same rev ceiling that you had on the 400. On the Kawasaki Ninja 400, I think that bike redlines to about 12,000 RPM. You guys will see here on the tachometer, this thing only redlines to about 11, maybe 10 and a half, something like that. So Kawasaki's built a platform that is much more broad, usable, low-end torque, nice linear power. And one thing that's nice about this parallel twin is it does make incredibly linear power. It's very, very smooth in the way it delivers it. I bet if you were to chart the torque and horsepower, you'd get a nice flat torque curve and a nice linear Y equals X for the horsepower, because it does feel very, very linear in the way it makes power. And I will say, cable throttle, super direct, super tactile. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Moving through traffic here a little bit. The clutch pull is very light. It's a cable actuated clutch, no hydraulic here or anything like that. You click through the gears. Gearbox nice and snickety. I love a Kawasaki gearbox. It's very precise, very tactile. Front brake feel, let's talk a little bit about that. We don't have anyone behind us, so we can grab a little bit of brakes here, bleed it off a little bit, increase the speed, and then just grab those brakes again. You know, this is not a very sophisticated braking system. This is an axially mounted brake caliper with a very rudimentary master cylinder here. Other bikes in this category have improved on braking performance. The CF Moto features a Brembo caliper, and the Aprilia RS457 has a radial mount bi-bree system that feels a little bit better too, albeit the pad on the RS457 is not as nice as the pad that's on the 500. That extra torque that this 451 has over the 399, the old motor, is certainly noticeable at lower highway speeds, kind of in the 50 to 70 mile an hour range in 6th gear. This bike can much more easily get up to highway speeds and much more easily pass, and you should have no qualms about this motorcycle keeping up in highway traffic, doing what it needs to do on your daily commute. And on top of that, some of the features that Kawasaki's decided to implement on this motorcycle definitely tells you that they're trying to get you to ride this bike a lot. Now, beginner riders, when they start out, they ride their bikes all the frickin' time. I remember when I started out, I looked for any excuse to ride my motorcycle. And I love seeing on our Discord server that people who just started out, they're like, I just checked down 4,000 miles this month. I'm having so much fun. And the new Ninja 500 is much less, you know, kind of fun, pokey sport bike than it is kind of like a baby sports touring thing. I know that sounds kind of crazy because it's supposed to be an entry-level sport bike, but honestly, with the way that the windshield is set up on this motorcycle, the extra passing power that the 451cc has. I'm in 6th gear right there. This guy can pass that minivan, no problem. Go back here in the right lane, doing 86 miles an hour. The Ninja's got plenty of legs to go all the way up to 110, no problems. And it'll happily do it. I got the USB outlet over here that I could easily put a phone mounting system, do some navigation. You know, other than the fact that I don't have cruise control and I don't have some of the other features that you might want to see on a motorcycle like this, you know, I think that it could definitely do some light sport touring duty. And it certainly is a very comfortable place to sit. This is not the old Ninja 400 that was a little pocket rocket, you know. The Ninja 400 was such a fun, peppy, playful little sport bike. The 500 has grown to be a much more mature, pulled together all-rounder. And I kind of called it that this would happen to this category a few years ago when I saw that the displacement creep was happening. I said to myself, man, I think we're going to start seeing more and more all-rounder bikes like we used to have back in the day. However, the other thing that's happened is the sport category has gotten super aggressive too. You know, you look at all the top-end bikes, they're pretty aggressive nowadays. Now, speaking of aggressive, this is a particularly bumpy section of the road. You'll see our Insta360 flailing around in the wind. We're doing a slight suspension check here. And the 500, it's compliant, but not overly stiff. You know, the RS457 is much stiffer. The CF Moto is way more, you know, dense feeling. The 500 still feels like a light, fun little bike. And what's cool is when you get it cranked over like this, it feels just like the 400, you know? That frame is the same, the suspension's the same, the weight is very similar. The only thing that's missing is that upper end of the rev ceiling that the 400 had. And that was pretty cool. I did like the fact that the 400 could rev to, you know, 12,000 RPM or so. Going through the speed bumps here, nice and compliant, very easy to go through speed bumps. The 500, the way that they've gone about this bike is they just wanted it as easy to ride as possible. You know, the Japanese philosophy is to just get more people on two wheels, really, especially with the entry-level category. The Kawasaki decided to make a bike that, you know, this is a really nice place to sit and to just log a bunch of miles and have fun and learn what you got to learn. And, you know, the type of rider that's going to grow into the Ninja 500 is the guy or gal that wants to do big days in the saddle, you know, maybe not necessarily take this bike out to the track, which you could. It's not going to be fantastic out of the box. I think the 400 was better out of the box for track work, just because it was a little bit more simple. It didn't have a few more failure points. It wasn't as pretty, you know, like this thing is a really nice little motorcycle. And I love the fact that Kawasaki has kind of segmented their beginner offerings a little bit better than most, you know. This Ninja 500 SE, it costs about $64.99. I think I paid a little over $8,200 out the door for this bike, if memory serves me correctly. As we make it up the hill here, going wide open. But you can get yourself a base model Ninja 500 for not a lot of money. I think it's like $52.99 if you get it no ABS, super bare bones. So you can certainly bring the price down. I think that the extra money for the SE does make some sense. Although some of the features I don't really need, you know, if you just want a USB and a slightly taller windshield and maybe some case savers for the engine, that'll probably run you close to 500 bucks. But you can get it exactly what you want. You don't have to rely on the Kawasaki stuff, which is kind of cool. But then the other side of the coin is if you want the beginner experience, but the bike you can really grow into and something really unique and novel, the ZX4 is always there for you, right? So Kawasaki now has a bike that has smaller displacement than this, right? Has a 399cc inline 4, which is just crazy that in 2024 they decided to have that on their lineup. But this 500 is so different from the ZX4. The ZX4 really is that pocket rocket, that really sporty, fun, premium experience that is competing more closely with that RS457 CF Moto category. I think the Ninja 500, especially in the SE with the keyless ignition and the TFT and all that stuff, it feels much more similar to an old gentleman sport touring bike from the early 2000s to me. To the point where this is peak beginner bike in a totally different way than the old, you know, Ninja 400 or even the new RS457. This is solving for a way different problem than the other bikes in the category. This is the best all-arounder beginner bike pick. This is super similar to a GSX 8R in my opinion, where you're getting a bike that can do a little bit of everything, you know? You can certainly go ride this bike around on street all day long, right? And that's really great. You can then turn around and you can go take it to a track day if you really need to and want to, right? It's totally capable to do that. Just maybe spoon on some more aggressive tires, because this motorcycle doesn't come equipped with the stickiest tires from the factory. It has kind of these like no name, I can't remember what kind of tires they're on, but in typical Japanese entry-level bike category, they go and they have some weirdo tire that is certainly not you know, gonna be super track day capable. But again, I don't really think the person buying a Ninja 500 is like that concerned with going on track. They're not like a total track rat and they're like, yeah, like I'm gonna get this bike and go charge up the Twisties, go crazy with it. And that's something that I do miss a little bit with the 400, because the 400 was so good at that. And this has kind of grown into a different kind of bike, right? It's a different kind of thing nowadays. We're about to enter a slightly twistier section here, and we'll see how the 500 likes to dance a little bit. Watch our entry here. Good to go. Keep it in third gear because we have some extra torque from that 451cc engine. Getting hit in the face with some of that grass. It's still pretty willing. Handles change of direction pretty good. Yeah, all right. It's still a Ninja 400 frame, so it feels awesome. You can ride this bike way faster than you should be able to, and you can definitely keep up with bigger bikes if you're brave enough and skilled enough. Yeah, it's nice, man. The throttle throw's a little long, typical Japanese bike stuff. It's got a nice amount of grunt in second. That's pretty good. I am going downhill, but it does pretty good. Wide open on the change of direction. Gearbox slipped the gear there for me. Y'all saw that I tried to grab up and caught a false neutral. That can happen sometimes. We'll cut the Kawasaki some slack there. It's still pretty darn fun. Despite being a slightly compact rider triangle, I don't feel like I fit super well on this thing. I feel like I am a little bit cramped. I remember on our Endurance 400, we had to do several ergonomic adjustments, and it always, I mean, they are small, right? Like the 400 category, it's a small motorcycle. But what's cool is, check this out, we take this tighter turn here in third gear, and I don't feel like I'm really struggling for torque out of the corner there. I think a bone stock ZX4 and a bone stock Ninja 500 on track would produce very similar lap times. The ZX4 has a taller ceiling, of course, but this thing being lighter weight and with more accessible torque from a bigger displacement engine, I think it could actually do quite a bit of damage on track. The ZX4 has a higher top speed of about 136 miles an hour. This one probably 115 if I were to guess. But a nice mid-range, a nice usable bike, you know? Very, very nice. Let's see here, enter that 15 mile an hour. Trail it in. Yeah, I mean, it works really well. Way better than I thought it would, given that I was like, man, it's still using the old Ninja 400 frame, the old Ninja 400 suspension, you know, virtually unchanged, just with a slightly strokier engine. But I've told you guys for years now, I'm like, the Ninja 400 is still so freaking good that Kawasaki didn't need to do that much to it. It didn't need to radically change what it was doing. And, you know, does an RS457 handle better? Yes, it does, absolutely. Does it have more character and charm? Yeah, for sure. But it's not as all-day capable and comfortable as this thing. This bike genuinely has, like, all-rounder vibes, you know? Which is great, which is what you want out of a bike like this, because beginner riders typically don't know that they want that, right? All right, let's get a little 0 to 60. I don't think there's anyone coming up behind us. So what's interesting is that because it's this longer stroke engine, obviously it doesn't have the rev ceiling that it used to have, but it also dies out pretty quickly. I was finding myself shifting at 9,000 to kind of keep it in the meat of the power band, because it feels like anything above 9 is just over rev and you're not really getting any more horsepower. It kind of just dies out, really. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, actually producing more horsepower when it comes down to it. It just kind of feels like it's giving you a little bit extra rev ceiling so that you have a little bit more to play with if you're, you know, over revving it or just having fun or being on track or whatever. It's interesting now that because there's two very strong parallel twin sport bikes in this category that have the 270-degree crank, this Ninja is now a bit strange in its 180-degree crank configuration. You know, I'm not even going to mention the R3, am I? Because it's like at this point, it's just kind of sad talking about the R3. And I think that the parallel twin here, the 180 crank, look, there's no beating around the bush. I would prefer to have the 270, right? It feels a little bit more exotic. It sounds a little bit better. It has more of a big bike presence and sound. You know, these 180 parallel twins, they will always sound a little piddly. They'll always sound a little dinky. You know, you can put an exhaust on it, but it has that kind of lawnmower sound to it. I like that sound because it reminds me of when I was racing my Ninja 400. But, you know, for the street, it doesn't have big bike presence, despite the fact that it is so much wider and larger than it ever was before. Such that I really think that it has, you know, like big bike presence if you just look at it, you know. If you just were to take a look at the Ninja 500, it certainly has bigger bike presence. As we make a nice comfortable pass there in 4th gear, enter into this corner here. Just gonna tighten up a teensy bit, we'll grab the brake, there we go, change the line. Watch for all these tar snakes. This section's real dicey. There we go. But it's nice to be able to use 4th gear, 5th gear on this bike, as opposed to the Ninja 400 that I was like, I have to grab as low a gear as possible to make sure I have torque coming out of the corner. You can ride this thing a little lazier, which is cool. Like you see there, I can go wide open in 4th, and it might take a little bit, but I don't feel like I'm like, oh my god, it's not moving at all. It points in a really sharp direction. It's got torque. It's working really well. Like, it really works really, really well. All right, let's check out these slow speed manners, shall we? With no TC, you should be able to wheelie this thing pretty easily. You don't have to futz around with any settings or anything. Let's go ahead and we'll flick it in 1st gear, just have some fun. I mean, yeah, you can pop front wheel. Do a little show for your buddies, all right? Okay, slow speeds on the 500. Let's see here, full lock. Pretty good. Oh, 360's hitting the mirror there. I gotta be careful with that. Don't want to have the steering stem lock up on me while I'm turning, do I? But yeah, you know, it has a pretty generous steering sweep. We go here, we go real tight. make ourselves dizzy a little bit. Ooh, you can go way tighter. I'll put my foot out just in case. Yeah, if you're in a little parking lot, crank it over. That's pretty good, yeah. Ergonomically, it's not that committed, right? Like, you're relatively upright, so you actually have good control over it in slow speeds. I don't think that this would be a bike that feels kind of awkward to do that sort of stuff. Also, the seat height is so low that if you really need to, I mean, look at that, you can put a foot down real easy. If you're a beginner, you're like, oh my god, you know, no problems at all. All right, boys. Ninja 500, the 5. What do I make of it? You know, it's not as exciting as some of the other bikes in the category, right? We just have to call a spade a spade. I don't think this motorcycle is quite as fun to ride as many of the other entry-level bikes in the category. But what it does do is it really hits the mark as a fantastic all-around motorcycle. I think that if you want a great entry-level sport bike, you don't want to think about, you know, reliability. You don't want to think about how you're going to ride it, or if it's too aggressive, or if it's this or that. Just get a 500, you know, like, this is a great option for those of you out there who just say, I just want a great sport bike that'll look cool and that I can just enjoy and I don't have to think anything about it. This is the one to get. You're not going to really notice the difference between this and an RS457 in the way that they handle, because you're not quite there yet in terms of your development as a motorcyclist. And I mean, if you like Team Green, it's quite green, you know. It looks really cool, right? It has a lot of presence and flavor. I think that despite the fact that it looks so racy and fun and interesting, it actually presents itself when you ride it as an incredibly approachable motorcycle that just about anybody could ride and enjoy. I don't know if it necessarily has quite as much prowess as a potential track day training toy. You can certainly do that with this motorcycle. I think the 400 is more your bag if that's what you're after. And so here's what I would say. I would say that if you like this bike, but you don't want to spend as much money, because like I said, this was like $8,200 out the door, I would say get a used Ninja 400. It does virtually everything this bike does, right? Just about everything. It doesn't have the fancy paint and some of the other stuff, but if you can live without that, you'll get a bike for half as much. You can get a Ninja 400 for $4,000, $4,500 all day, every day on the used market, and then just add yourself some case savers, maybe a throttle lock for cruise control so you can go out and take it on long rides, and get yourself a USB outlet, taller windshield, and it does everything this bike is going to do. So from a value perspective, I'm a little torn. I'm kind of like, well, it's a lot of money for a bike that I can get on the used market that's functionally the same, because we're seeing diminishing returns now with these motorcycles. So the Ninja 500, I think as a motorcycle, I'm going to rate it like a 7.7 out of 10. It's not quite as exciting as some of the other bikes. I think it's a little expensive in this SE configuration, and I think that a 400 is just too similar to this thing to really justify getting a 500. But it's still a great bike, and I'm really excited that somebody out there is going to get this one for free, because I really hope this goes to a great home, a beginner rider who's just looking to get started, because this is an awesome, awesome little motorcycle. So folks, thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed this quick ride and review on the Ninja 500. We're going to have plenty more content coming on this machine. Make sure you are tuned in to yammynoob.co and the website here. Get your chances locked and loaded to win this motorcycle. We're going to have tons of amazing content coming out on this machine in the next couple of weeks while we still have it. And if you have anything you want to see me do with this bike, please let me know in the comments down below. I do try to read all the comments, and of course, if you're on the Discord server, let me know that way too. We'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
Keep watching Yammy Noob.